all board members are here. And I see Mayor Snyder, and I saw Councilor Goodhouse just tag in, and I think I saw Frank as well. So we'll go ahead and get started this evening. I want to welcome everyone to the special joint meeting of the Tigard Tualatin School Board, the cities of Tigard and Tualatin, and really do appreciate it's been a full weekend, yet I'm sure a different weekend, but still busy for a Monday evening for all of us to convene on this very, very important topic. So I do want to thank everyone for attending this evening and look forward to our conversations. I am Maureen Wolf. I'm the chair of the Tigard Tualatin School Board. And before I hand it to Director Unn for introductions, I do want to acknowledge Director Jill Zerchmead and Vice Chair Ben Bowman for their work representing the board through this task force process. So thank you to Jill and Ben for that leadership. And Director Unn.
Thank you again. Thank you so much for being here tonight. What I think I'll do is I'll go ahead and ask our partners to introduce themselves, but also again go to then our city council mayors to introduce themselves and welcome all of you to our joint session tonight. So let's start actually with the Tigard Police. If you wouldn't mind sharing who you are, that would be great. You can unmute.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. I am Police Chief Kathy Mcalpine for the Tigard.
Chief, I think we lost you for a little bit there.
Shoot. Excuse me.
Well, Zen, yeah, I can go while the chief gets the technology figured out. I'm Jamie McDonald. I'm the services commander at the Tigard Police Department, and the SRO program would live in the division that I supervise.
Thank you. Other representatives from the Tigard Police Department?
Yeah, hello, my name's Nick Nunn. I am or would be the Tigard High School SRO for this current year and the year to come.
Thank you. Chief, did you want to try again?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Didn't realize I didn't come through. Police Chief Kathy McAlpine, Tigard Police Department. Good evening, everyone.
Thank you. Tualatin Police Department?
I'm Brian Struckmeyer, Services Captain for the Tualatin Police Department.
Yeah, I'm Sergeant Jeremy Rankin. I'm the sergeant for our SROs and also our detective unit.
And I am Brian Miller, and I'm one of the Tualatin High School resource officers.
And Chief Steele, did you want to introduce yourself?
Yep, sorry, just got logged on. Bill Steele, Chief of Police in Tualatin.
Thank you. And then can we have representatives from Tigard, City Council and Mayor?
Hi, I'm Jason Snyder, the Mayor of Tigard. Good evening, everyone.
Hi, I'm John Goodhouse, Council President, Tigard, Oregon.
Hi, everyone. I'm Heidi Lube. I'm a Tigard City Councilor.
Hi, I'm Emilio Calderon. I'm the Youth City Councilor.
Councilor-elect, City of Tigard, Jeanette Shaw.
Is that everyone from the City of Tigard?
I would expect one or two more, but they may either be having technology issues. The Councilor Liz Newton and Councilor Tom Anderson that we would be missing, I think, at this point.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, let's go to our City of Tualatin Council and Mayor.
Frank Buenik, excuse me, Frank Buenik, Mayor Tualatin.
Nancy Grimes, City Council President.
Valerie Pratt, Tualatin City Council.
Bridget Brooks, Tualatin City Councilor.
Good evening, Robert Kellogg, Tualatin City Council.
Good evening, everyone. Paul Morrison, Tualatin City Council.
Is that everyone from City of Tualatin?
Believe so.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Okay, let's go to our city managers, if you are able to share.
Sherilyn Lombo, go ahead, Sherilyn. Sherilyn Lombo, City Manager in Tualatin.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kathy Nyland. I'm the interim city manager at the City of Tigard.
Thank you. And then can we have TTSD board members?
Hey everyone, this is Ben Bowman, TTSD Board Vice Chair.
Good evening, everybody. This is Sharon Fox.
Hi, I'm Jill Zerschmied, Tigard Tualatin School District.
I'm Karen Emerson.
I'm Rowan Kelleher. I'm the Tigard High School student representative to the school board.
I'm Emily Fung Tran. I'm the student rep from Tualatin High School.
Zinnia, you're still muted.
I meant, yes, next group would be cabinet members for Tigard Tualatin School District and our superintendents.
Good evening, I'm Dr. Sue Ricky Smith, Superintendent.
Good evening, all. I am Dr. Lisa McCall, Assistant Superintendent, Tigard Tualatin.
Good evening, I'm Carol Kinch. I'm the Director of Student Services for Tigard Tualatin.
Good evening, Amber Field, Director of Secondary and High School Success, Tigard Tualatin.
Hi, everyone. Tracy Rose. I am the Director of Community Relations and Communications for the district.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Darren Bernard, Director of Operations and Bond.
And good evening, I'm Zinnia. I'm the district's Director of Equity and Inclusion. And if we can have our facilitators also introduce themselves.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Tara Cooper, and I'm one of the facilitators.
And good evening, everyone. I'm John Lintz, and partnering with Tara Cooper with the facilitation.
And special thank you to Patty Roberts and Lisa Burton for helping with our presentation tonight. Is there anyone that I missed? I apologize if I did. There's a lot of little screens on my screen. Okay, thank you. So Director Wolf, did you want to go over the agenda and then we can go from there? Oh, I see Director Moore. Hi, Director Moore.
Hi, Zinnia. Thank you.
Did you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm David Moore, CFO for the district. Sorry I'm late. I was having some technical issues this evening.
No problems at all. Director Wolf, did you want to go over the agenda and go to the Art of Community?
Sure. Thank you, Director. And well, once again, welcome everyone. The agenda, if you had an opportunity to look at the packet, is brief, and yet I know that the conversations will be deep and quite thoughtful. We will do a quick exercise before we really begin to start in conversation, which we call the Art of Community. And that really is a reflection of these conversations are very serious. And how, and they're really reflective of a lot of the conversations we've had over the past year. So to ensure that we all come in and are really thoughtful and reflective about this work, we will do this exercise right there, the Art of Community. And as I chat, you all can read through those. What I will ask you to do is, as you reflect on all those statements, think of one in particular that resonates with you. And given that we are a large group, I'm just going to ask everyone in the chat to identify what is that one perspective in the Art of Community that you're willing to commit to this evening that really sticks with you and you find relevant for this evening's conversation. So as you do that, the agenda, Director Unn has a presentation, I think, to really summarize the extended work that all of you have been doing now for several months. And as well as that is to facilitate questions and answers as we engage further in this conversation. And I'm certain that Tara Cooper and John will likely engage in those conversations as well. But I think the next will be a presentation and then further conversation. And I have a feeling that that will fill up our time as expected. So right now, if everyone, those of you identified, you know where the chat is, please look that over and I'll give you a minute to read them and then to identify that one, put it in the chat, and then we'll move from there. So thank you.
And we'll go ahead and give 2 minutes for this. And as we wrap up this portion, we find that at TTSD, when we do take the time to really think about what we're committing to in regards to being in community with one another, it also offers a time for us to kind of anchor into this new conversation, because I know with the hecticness of our lives and our meetings and so forth, it takes a little bit of time to even reset. So being able to be in community with one another and reading what folks are willing to commit to, it offers time for us to recenter. So again, thank you so much, Director Wolf, for leading us through that. And we'll be heading on to the next part of our agenda. So as part of our presentation tonight, we will be holding space and sharing a little bit of background information, as well as some of the major themes that we will be reviewing and unpacking with the support and guidance as facilitated by John and Tara. So these are some of the major themes that have come up in part of the process that we'll be reviewing: perceptions of safety, student and staff interactions with SROs, lack of clarity around SRO roles and responsibilities, feedback and continuous improvement, structural issues, and social political challenges. So we would like to offer time, and I'm looking to our partners in this process to share as they feel ready to. we wanted to do a quick check-in around how our partnership began and reflect on those pieces as we go into reviewing the summary report from John and Tara. So I just want to remind that in partnership, Tigard Tualatin School District, the Police Department, and the cities of Tigard and Tualatin are partnering to assess the role of school resource officers in schools. Through data collection and facilitated listening sessions, stakeholders have had the opportunity to provide feedback to help determine next steps for SROs in our school district. And I just wanted to I will be asking some of our partners to read some of the hopes that we had at the beginning of our process. If you wouldn't mind unmuting and reading that part, I would appreciate it. So can we have Sherilyn, do you mind reading the first one?
Sure. Elevating the things that go unseen. When thinking about SROs, there has been a lot of pivot or compounding process that adds to the complexity of this work. Historical understanding of SROs and education in general, drugs, gangs, 9/11, active shooters, social media, and sexting and bullying. These are all centered on the majority or mainstream. The need for health and safety will not go away. And how will we center those unheard and reimagine how we live as a community?
Thank you. Can I please ask Commander McDonald to read the next one?
Certainly. Shared understanding and clarity about how to move forward tomorrow and a path forward for next year and beyond.
Thank you. Can I ask Officer Miller to read the next one?
Yes, plan for moving forward. We have a 15 to 20-year history and see what the future will look like.
Thank you. Director Fields, do you mind reading the next one?
Whatever the plan leaves the community, students, families, and folks hopeful. The history and achievement of our SROs can be highlighted and elevated as appropriate so their role doesn't automatically become conflated with other narratives around policing. Partnership members are able to respond in ways that are authentic, consistent, and allow folks to feel heard, even if facing criticism from constituents or stakeholders.
Thank you. And then Chief Mcalpine, do you mind reading this next one?
Sure, if I can get rid of my, there we go. The Tigard community sees the holistic approach that reflects physical safety, mental health, and personal connections to the school community, and that our community sees the SRO in that approach.
Thank you. And so with that, we embarked on a pretty thorough and long journey that we hope to continue forth. Can I please have Dr. McCall, do you mind reading this one?
Sure. Community isn't always synonymous with warmth and harmony. Politeness is often a veneer for understanding, when in reality, it is mass uncovered territory, the unspeakable pit that we turn from because we know the pain and anger that can dwell there. It is important to remind ourselves that real community is forged out of struggle. This is the crucible from which a real community grows. And that's Linda Christensen.
Thank you. And so as part of that journey, we had 4 points of data sets. You can find these in the artifacts that was sent out to you prior to this meeting. You can also find it on the link on the flyer as well, where all of these data sets are currently there. John and Tara will be reviewing the summary report, but these were the different data sets that we collected. We did a TTSD insight data. When we talk about equity, you know, parts of that work is offering various ways of opportunities and connections with the community to share their insight. So we had the TTSD insight data through a survey. We hosted, with the help of John and Tara, listening sessions, focus groups, and through the support and diligence of our TTSD SRO Review Oversight Committee, they had asked for more feedback from students' perspective. And so we pushed out another student-focused survey, and also students in leadership groups and affinity groups had held listening sessions for recommendations to be given to the TTSD SRO Review Oversight Committee. And then finally, we had a group of community members that came together to review the data and ask questions, have conversations with one another to broaden perspectives, and then offered their recommendations to the question about SROs in schools. And as part of that work, we are led and guided by our equity lens. We asked ourselves these questions as we walk through this process. Does this decision align with the district mission and vision? Who does this decision affect, both positively and negatively? Does the decision being made ignore or worsen existing disparities or produce other unintended consequences? Are those being affected by the decision included in the process? What other possibilities were explored? And is the decision or outcome sustainable? And some of these questions will actually lead to our discussion today as well. So without further ado, we want to invite presenters John Lenson and Tara Cooper to share our SRO partnership report and the summary.
Thank you so much, Xenia. As has been mentioned, John and I had the privilege of hosting the facilitated listening sessions, as well as some individual interviews. And in this process, the participants included a wide variety of the stakeholders. Hopefully we were able to touch all of the stakeholders for that matter. So we met with SROs, students, families and community members, staff and administrators at the school district. As Xenia has said, we did surveys. There were 2 iterations of the surveys that went out, but really the benefit of doing the facilitated listening sessions as well as the interviews is that it gave us an opportunity to listen closely and ask those important questions that helped us understand more about the context and the meaning behind the experience and perspectives that were shared. And so tonight, what John and I would like to do is go over some of our findings. For those who have had the opportunity to read over the report, much of what we're going to cover is in the report, but we just want to go into it a little deeper. And you'll also find that much of what we're sharing, particularly under the key themes, are actual quotes from participants or paraphrase statements that we heard from multiple participants, because in this process, it's really important to hear the voices of those stakeholders that are impacted and really vested in the outcome of this decision, and also to show the complexity with which we're dealing with tonight. So to start off, we wanted to share some key observations. And with these observations, we hope to kind of frame more of the themes and comments that you'll hear us share as we go through the presentation. And so I'll pass it to John.
Yeah, and we've selected some of the key observations from the report. And so you will see selected pieces that we're just going to highlight in our presentation this evening, and more details are in the report. But one of the key observations, and this kind of frames the context and the situation, is the school district is navigating a situation where the majority support having SROs in the schools, and a significant minority do not support having armed SROs in the schools. And so how do we navigate that tension, complexity? And again, we heard thoughts, concerns that were significant and meaningful, but maybe weren't eliminating the whole SRO program, but gave some examples about the way in which the SRO presence might actually warrant serious consideration about the program and how it's designed and how it could be redesigned. So go ahead and move to the next slide. Many of those who favored the SRO program shared their perception that there was added safety to the program. It made them feel that the schools were safer and more protected. And yet that was more a perception and feelings rather than supported by data. And again, I'm not going to read through all the slides, but these are some of the key observations that really kind of framed our discussion, but also framed our learnings, from the listening sessions.
Next slide. The first of the major themes, goes with perceptions of safety, which John just spoke on. And some of the quotes that we heard, students may be deterred from shooting up schools. I don't want to be around someone carrying a gun, even though I know nothing will happen to me. I am not comfortable. Another participant shared, I do feel comfortable knowing there are SROs at middle school and high school. Having an SRO there is helpful. SROs can help with lock in, lock out. Another said, as a staff person of color, I do not equate the police with safety. Another shared, I'm terrified about school shootings. Next slide, please. And just a couple more on the perceptions of safety that we'll share. Someone told us, being around firearms in full tactical gear does not make me feel safe, makes me uncomfortable. And someone else stated, having SROs means no lag time in calling for assistance and other services for students. So in terms of perceptions of safety, here we see a variety of experiences and different perceptions, sometimes conflicting, but in this process, our task or your task for the elected officials is to take all of these into consideration, despite the fact that they're often conflicting, because these are all of the different things that we're hearing. And sometimes the complexity of these comes in because someone could say one very clear statement one moment, and the next statement could kind of contradict it, just showing that even when it comes to the perceptions of safety, it's not a clear answer. Next slide, please.
So one of the themes that everyone touched on in the listening sessions had to do with the actual interactions with SROs, from staff and from students. So these are some of the themes that people spoke to. Our SRO knew all of the children and had an understanding of what the kids needed and responded accordingly. They just wanted to get to know the kids. And then another perspective, the community expects that when an SRO shows up, even if there are white students involved, it will be Black and brown students taken away in handcuffs. A theme that emerged, the SRO role should stay as it is. It is the perfect amount of involvement and presence. Kids need to learn how to interact with the police. These are skills for the rest of their lives.
Next slide.
So building a false sense of trust between students and police sets them up for punishment later. So there's that complexity of trust. Some say we want our children and our students and our families to have a relationship and trust with the police, but this perspective suggests that it could be a false sense of trust. And then we heard from many people, multiple experiences that have been overwhelmingly positive. SROs are not created equally by and large. I have seen amazing relationships formed, seen them as coaches. They are seen as celebrities and embraced by students of all backgrounds at football games. And then we also heard students of color feel targeted and like they are stopped and questioned in the hall more frequently than white students.
Can we go back one slide? I just want to add a little more context to this. To the first one on this slide, building a false sense of trust between students and police sets them up for punishment later. This was actually a sentiment that we heard from multiple people. And what it speaks to is the fact that beyond the individual SROs that are in the building that may be building strong relationships, eventually these students have to go beyond the school into the communities. And there was what they were reflecting on was the historical and present experience of some of the families and students of color in the community where the relationship with the police might be a little more tenuous. And the idea that, you know, they're setting up these relationships of trust within the school in ways in which they can interact and relate with the police officers, and that may not translate out in the public and in the greater community. And I think that that's a perfect example of how some of the larger socio-political things going on really does impact the experiences of our students and families in the school, even if we have officers who we trust, even if the program provides a different form of policing or interacting with the students. There's still the long-term repercussions that families and students are worried about. Next slide, please. Another theme that we saw, and this was a pretty big one, was the lack of clarity around the SRO role. One of the things that was clear is that of all the stakeholders, it seemed that the SROs were the ones that had the clearest idea of what their role were and expectations and outcomes that they were hoping for. Beyond that, it got a little murky. So some of the feedback that we received when we asked what folks thought and experienced the role of SROs as was being a resource in collaboration and partnership with the schools, visiting health classes and classes such as search and seizure and government classes, also helping out with safety committees. The role is keeping kids safe, building community, and helping the students in developing relationships with police. The SROs are a vital part of the program. They provide support for extremely aggressive and unsafe behaviors. Next slide. The SRO program has never been explained in any formal way as to why they are here. What is their purpose? They come in a lot of gear. Are they here to protect or just hang out with students? And that was actually a comment from the students. And that was definitely a reoccurring theme among the students. They were unsure of what to expect from the program and SRO officers. A couple of other comments. The SROs are vital to helping administrators with daily issues. And people confuse the role of SROs and security. Next slide, please.
Well, let's go back for just a moment, because we asked the students and community members and family and staff and the SROs, what do you think the role is today and what do you think the role should be? And there was a lack of clarity on both of those. Again, going back to what Tara said, the only group that seemed to have a clear understanding of the role of the SROs today really were the SROs themselves. So it wasn't just the confusion on the role today, but also different perspectives in terms of moving forward, lack of clarity.
Yeah, and I think what's a really important piece to pull out of that in terms of context is one of the main tensions is between, are they there as law enforcement to handle drug and other violent issues as they come up? Or are they there to be a resource beyond that and build relationships with students? And there was a lot of back and forth around that one.
Yeah, and also to what extent are they a part of the team in the school building? So, and that it depended, and lack of clarity there. So one of our learnings from this process in listening and to all the different stakeholders is around feedback and improvement. And what we came to understand was that the SRO program has not really been reviewed or evaluated. And there have been minimal opportunities for feedback from the district provided to the SROs, to the police departments, to the city of Tigard, to the city of Tualatin. And also we heard from students and families that there was no real process or expectation that if they had a concern or an issue, how could they share that or bring that up? And then there's no evidence of consistency in program planning at the building level in relation to the partnership. And so how can there be change or improvement when there's no real consistent partnering in planning? And then in terms of what feedback and opportunities do SROs receive, it wasn't clear the extent that SROs were actually included with the priorities that the school district has established around training, for all of their staff and their families and students, especially around restorative justice, student development, and those sorts of things. So opportunities there to explore how to really move towards continuous improvement, how to set up structures for feedback.
So some of the structural issues that came up again in our learning in this process, in one area was around roles and responsibility and disproportionate discipline and referrals. In this process, there was a lot of attention placed on the SROs in terms of disproportionate impact on students of color receiving discipline and referral actions and citations. And one of the things that we learned is that there was minimal acknowledgement of TTSD's role in the discipline and referral process. And so that was something that we definitely think should be brought to attention in terms of the partnership and in decision-making and how to move forward with this. Another area is program development. One of the things that we learned is that SROs are viewed as individuals rather than representatives of a program. To give you an example, there have been SROs doing amazing things within the school districts, as evidenced by the feedback that we receive from students and staff. Certain officers were named time and time again, and specific examples of ways in which they were a resource or helpful or built strong relationships with students. And while participants could speak to those individuals and those actions, they could not speak with that same clarity in terms of a program and the outcomes, meaning no matter who the SRO, this is what we should be able to expect. And so that was one area where we noticed some structural issues. Also, in terms of program evaluation, again, John just mentioned this, no routine or formal process to provide feedback to the program or individual SROs. And while, within the police department, the supervisors were definitely providing feedback and doing annual evaluations, they didn't have that information coming from the school district. And even John mentioned that students and families didn't know of a process to provide feedback outside of a personal relationship with an individual officer. Staff also reported that there was no process for them if they saw something concerning or had questions, how they would go about addressing that. Next slide, please. One other piece that needs to be considered in this conversation is differing relationships in the SRO program. Histories and relationships with the Tigard Police Department and the Tualatin Police Department are different, and sometimes the issues on those campuses are different, but they're discussed as if the two programs are completely homogenous. And while there isn't much difference, there are some nuances here and there that might it'd be worthwhile to look at and address should the program continue, or just in discussions of how to move forward. I mentioned the complaint process already, and then the next one, despite the stakeholders repeatedly stating the importance of strong SRO relationships with students, that was a theme that was heard across stakeholders. So, the SROs intend to have good relationships. Administrators and staff would hope that there were good relationships. There was actually no metrics or opportunities shared with us that that reflected relationships or positive interactions with SROs, meaning the district isn't collecting that data. There was no programmatic structure around that. So it's hard to know exactly what's being done and the consistency in terms of building relationships and how that's being evaluated, or the feedback that students or those who are participating in those relationships, how much say or feedback they have in that process. Next slide.
Let's stay with the slide just for a moment. I want to go back to the complaint process. So when students feel like there's no process to complain and they have an issue or they have a complaint or they have a perception or they felt uncomfortable or they felt harmed, they talk to each other. But the school resource officers never had the opportunity to hear the complaints or the concerns. So there was no opportunity to respond or to change and to build relationships. And so in the absence of a process, it just kind of simmers and people hold on to their perceptions and their sense of not feeling safe, especially when there's already a gap there. So I just wanted to highlight that, and because the lack of a complaint process isn't just harming the students, but it also is preventing the school resource officers from responding to issues and complaints and working through them.
I appreciate you sharing that, John, too, because what that brings up for me too in this process is potentially an opportunity to pause. Some of the feedback that we heard from stakeholders was, this isn't an issue. It's only coming up because of Black Lives Matter or what PPS did or just what we're seeing in the news. And another perspective to that is this has been simmering all along because there were no opportunities for feedback or constructive dialogue. And this was just a moment where it kind of erupted and there was an opportunity to share these feelings and perspectives and concerns. And so I offer that in this conversation just as another perspective and another potential way to view this, because I think that there's something there, and based on the examples and feedback that we heard in the listening sessions and even the individual interviews where folks may have felt too vulnerable or that, a lack of safety to talk in a group and they just wanted a smaller group or an interview. There is something there that goes beyond just something that someone has seen in the news or heard from someone else. These were personal experiences that people were bringing to light, and they're issues that have been there for a while. Okay, next slide, please. The last couple of structural issues that really stood out were questions around training. We mentioned this before, but there was a lack of awareness on the parts of most stakeholders as to exactly what type of training SROs receive, particularly being in a school environment. And then also the added layer of the opportunity or missed opportunity for them to do training alongside the district. And some examples were restorative justice and some of the equity work being done by the district. Lastly, a structural issue that came up again, there were questions about disproportionate rates of citations being offered to students of color. And one of the things that we learned in this process in terms of the structure, go back a slide, is that at Tualatin High School, the Washington County Juvenile Department, there's actually a staff member on site at the school, and they're the ones who make the decision of whether or not to refer students to the district attorney. And most aren't aware of that, and they assume that it's solely on the SRO or the SRO and the administrator. But in this case, there's someone else, and that call is kind of outside of their hand, although they may provide information. Next slide.
So all of this review of the SRO program and the concerns of students and families and staff and community and this partnership review It's occurring in a time of political and social polarization. You know, for example, Black Lives Matter, the call to defund the police. And we call out polarization because people have strong opinions and experiences and perspectives and lived experience on both sides and everywhere in between, but a lot of polarization. And many actually, you know, entered into this process through the lens of politics, you know, that this is a political issue, or maybe this is not a Tigard Tualatin issue, maybe this is a big city issue, this is a bigger political issue. And then, you know, part of this sociopolitical context is that the school district has actually contributed to the overrepresentation of students of color in referrals to juvenile justice. And we don't, when we address that, we don't mean to say that that's an intention. It's an unintended outcome. It's a reality. It's part of the socio-political context, and that overrepresentation of students of color in referrals to juvenile justice is historical, and it's part of the lived experience of the Tigard and Tualatin and Oregon, you know, communities. And then we have the real current reality of students especially, but students and families, all of the interactions with social media, which have really resulted in different perspectives for the students often than for the adults. And some of the issues of racism and social justice and access to lived experience has been really accelerated through social media. But again, we're living in this context of great impacts by the social media and on the lives of students and families, and they impact the way we experience and understand these issues.
I would just like to add to that point too, because like I think the key point in that is just the level of awareness. We went into the listening sessions in this, and based on what I had heard in the process from partnership and just within the TTSD community, I was expecting that we would hear primarily from students and families of color who had concerns about the SRO program or who were just flatly against it. And interestingly enough, there was a mix. A lot of people see this as an issue of, you know, the Black students are upset or students of color are upset. But I think that the concerns and issues raised go beyond color and ethnicity in the TTSD school district. There is a heightened awareness of the historical and current day impact of policing in communities. There is a greater awareness of some of the trauma that goes along with it, and in some very astute ways, students were able to put those concerns forward. So I just offer that to say that this is something that this isn't just one group's problem or one group riling people up. This is a community that's recognizing some issues and raising concerns over it. Next slide, please. So some of the lingering questions and comments and recommendations that came from participants. Some of the main ones were more student voice in the process. And that's, you know, from beginning to end, from selection throughout the year and being able to provide feedback. They also asked for more diverse representation among SROs. We heard that from families and students, and diverse representation in terms of gender as well as racial and ethnic background. And the students asked for more, and actually parents as well, more opportunities for students to develop positive relationships with SROs. The students, a lot of the students that we heard from, you know, may have been familiar or seen the SROs around campus, but didn't really know of the opportunities to engage with them, never even had an opportunity, according to their experiences, to be introduced or meet them and understand why they were on campus fully. So they were looking for opportunities to develop more positive relationships. Another consistent recommendation was less tactical gear, including no guns. There were quite a number of participants who were not necessarily against the program, but very concerned and had strong reactions to being in the building with officers in their full tactical gear carrying guns. Other recommendations is more training, and specifically training around issues pertaining to students, and school-age students, around student development, also the equity training and restorative justice. Next slide, please. More opportunities for constructive feedback and dialogue. So this isn't just, an opportunity to provide complaints, but really to have conversation and dialogue around some of the issues that are happening in the community and even within the schools, so that it doesn't have to get to just send in a complaint and whatever happens. But if we're all a part of this community and in this together, having opportunities to sit down and talk about some of the issues that may be coming up or questions that students have. Other recommendations were more funding towards addressing mental health needs in schools, defining the role of SROs, and then of course, if there is no SRO program, many of the stakeholders they want to know what is the safety plan without SROs. Next slide.
So a number of questions emerged from the participants and also from our work. And these are intended to be helpful in terms of moving forward, decision-making. And so one of them is it possible to eliminate or reduce the experience of stress and harm for students, families of color, and others by making changes in the program? Is that possible? Because if it's not possible, then it's more the decision, keep it or eliminate it. But is that way possible? Another big question, in what ways do SROs actually contribute to school safety? It's important to know and understand that. It's also important to know the history. So the question is, in what ways have SROs deterred or effectively intervened in school shootings? There are multiple perspectives on that, but it's a deep question. And do we know the implications if SROs are not in the schools? And can we use data to know the potential impacts if the program is terminated?
If I could jump in on this one, we recognize no one has a magic ball that can tell the future, but these questions around safety and perceptions of safety really do require a bit more attention, because some of the feedback we got, particularly from students, was that they doubted their safety if there were to be a school shooting, because they know how large their campuses are. They know the fights and things that break out with no adults ever around. And so, they're questioning how realistic, particularly on campuses where there is not an SRO station, every day for the full day, is it that they can deter the shootings or a violent incident, which hopefully would never happen. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because oftentimes that is some of the rationale that's stated, and it's just left at that for people to take. But it's important for the community to recognize folks are asking deeper questions and wanting to have realistic conversations of what they can expect from SROs and from this program. And so it warrants deeper discussions. Next slide.
So one of the themes and one of the questions that came up for us around this theme is in terms of health and wellness and developing relationships with students. Could social workers or mental health staff meet these needs in ways that SROs cannot? And how could the partnership benefit from adding or even collaborating with these roles? And if the SRO program is in collaboration with Washington County Juvenile Department, In what ways does or can the district have similar partnerships with on-site social and or mental health workers? And these are questions that the district has been examining, but can those questions be examined and probed in partnership, with the cities and in partnership with the SRO programs? And then, one of the deeper probing questions, and this really emerged for both me and Tar in our listening sessions, especially with the students, is in what ways will sessions of SROs actually listening to students, especially students of color, result in improved communication and relationships? Because there hasn't been much dialogue. There hasn't been much support or opportunities for SROs to really listen to students and respond to students, especially students of color. And then, continue to probe in what ways do politics interfere and impact? How are we able to address multiple perspectives and needs that have surfaced during this review process? This review process is not a one and done. This is an ongoing process of how to address multiple perspectives in a very politicized context. And then deeper in kind of framing this within the situation in our community, in our state, and in our nation, is how will the communities move forward with different and conflicting understanding of the Black Lives Matter movement? Because we do not have in the community, and this is what Tara and I heard, we do not have exactly the same understanding of the Black Lives Matter movement. In fact, there are conflicting understandings of it, perspectives on it. And so, but how do we move forward with those conflicts and those competing, lived experiences and competing understandings?
And just adding to that, knowing that at just the barest minimum that the district stands for the importance and dignity of Black lives, beyond the politicized meanings. How do we as a community make sure that Black students and families are supported and heard, and not just used as props in the political Black Lives Matter propaganda? And I know that's kind of heavy, but that's where this sits, because we're serving students and students are in the midst of that and hearing messages of, oh, I don't want to hear about Black Lives Matter, when the district is talking about the lives and dignities of human beings, and that the lives and dignities of all human beings matter, including our Black students. So how do we continue to make that statement and have our students, most importantly, those young folks that are coming into the building every day, feel that affirmation that they are seen and heard and more than just political fodder? Next slide, please. So in closing, while we do not offer specific recommendations of whether or not to keep the program, that's not our role here, we would like to suggest some opportunities and possible next steps based on the listening sessions and feedback from stakeholders. And one of those would be create opportunities for SROs and administrators to hear the lived experiences of students and families of color and others who do not experience safety in the presence of SROs. This goes back to creating opportunities for facilitated dialogue, but more than that, an opportunity to hear from folks, as John and I got to hear from just a few, of what in their experience and their perspective leads them to not feel the same degrees of safety that others may feel in the presence of an armed officer. Because I think the first step is just at least hearing and understanding that, so that we can begin to move forward in developing positive relationships if the program continues, or whatever the relationship may be between these police departments in the school districts.
And let me just
Also, there's opportunity.
and let me just
Also, there's opportunity. Oh, sorry, John, go ahead.
Oh, no, you finish and then I'll go.
Well, I was just going to read the next point, so go ahead.
Okay, so where we talk about opportunities for facilitated dialogue, that's deep work. You can't just say, okay, now tell me your lived experience. That's why it needs to be facilitated. And we need to have some protocols, kind of like the art of community, because to share for a student of color or a Black student in particular, I'm just thinking of students right now, to share their experience and their sense of lack of safety with a school resource officer who might be the person who triggers their lack of safety. That takes some work. That takes some time. And so this opportunity is not a one-time event. This is over time, opportunities for facilitated dialogue.
Yeah, something else that I just thought about with that is, as many know, some may not be familiar, there's an acronym going around, ACAB, which is very derogatory towards our police officers. And again, talk about sociopolitical context. That's the context in which, if this program continues, we're asking officers to come into the schools and build relationships with students. There needs to be opportunity for some deeper dialogue here, and not just, it's important for students, absolutely, and families to share their experiences, but also having the opportunity for both sides to share their experiences of ACAB and how do we move forward in community and recognize the impact on both sides, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's the deeper restorative work.
Yeah.
It involves dialogue and listening and back and forth.
So moving forward, the opportunities, you have the opportunity to do some work around better understanding community members' needs and desires for safety in school. As we've heard throughout this presentation, there are different expectations of safety and experiences of safety. And so I think that the district, based on what we heard, this is an opportunity to learn a little bit more about that, as opposed to assuming that what's safe for one is safe for everyone. Also engage administrators in deeper equity training focused on the disproportionate impact of discipline policies and practices. As John mentioned, it's unintentional that we have these disproportionate numbers in terms of discipline, but one way to deal with that is to be intentional around the training and work we do around making sure that race and ethnicity is not an indicator of a negative experience on school campuses. Next slide, please. Some of this is kind of redundant, so I'll kind of skip through, but a great opportunity here is to really strengthen the collaboration and partnership. Should you decide to continue with the SRO program or some iteration of it, I think this entire review process has illuminated some ways in which you could definitely build a stronger partnership around this. And within that partnership, further define expectations and responsibilities for the school district. So it's not just a one-way relationship where all of the expectations fall on the SROs.
Yeah.
Let's see.
And continue to collect data. Qualitative and quantitative data, just to better understand the program, its impact, opportunities for shift and change. But to do that systemically, I think there's a great opportunity there.
Absolutely. And the last one that I'll say from this slide is define opportunities and expectations around student SRO relationships and those relationship building opportunities. To give a specific example, we heard many adults cite that the officers had strong relationships with students because, at football games, the students would crowd around them, or in the hallways, they would high five them. A high five is not a relationship, let alone a strong relationship. If someone in authority in full tactical gear and a gun is walking your direction and holds up a hand for the high five, it is very likely that you're going to high five them, whether you like them, whether you know them, whether you want to be in relationship with them. And I'm sure that there are students that have good relationships. That's not my point here. The point is we need to create specific opportunities and have some ways of measuring around and evidence of success in terms of strong relationships, and not just these perceptions of random pass-bys in the hallway or quick conversations. Students are far more complex, just like all human beings in terms of relationship building. And we really need to take that into account in these relationships in particular. Next slide, please. Opportunity to look at professional development. And really, if you're going to continue in the program, and these are resource officers for the schools and for the district, make them a part of the community by including them in district trainings. Also including increasing school involvement in selection and evaluation process of SROs. I know that that is, can be a little tricky because at the end of the day, the police departments, these are employees of the police department and they have the final say, and evaluation is their responsibility, but find creative ways at least to have some sort of input from the school district in terms of who's building.
I'm going to go back to the professional development opportunity. The other part of that is SROs actually do participate in a lot of professional development and training that the school district is not aware of. And so to even for the SROs to share some of their learning and some of their training and some of their experience, and not always to come back and train the schools on it, but to just share what they're learning and what their training is would also be helpful, because that was also a big question mark. So a great opportunity there.
And what I'll say lastly to this slide is just to improve communications. I know for John and I, there have been moments of kind of frustration in this process because our role was to listen and not interact and answer questions. But having done quite a bit of digging and interviewing with SROs, we knew the answers to some of the questions that people were asking, for example, around professional development and recognizing the professional development that the officers do receive. But all of that we know, the community needs to know, and they're curious to know, clearly, as you can see from the feedback that we've shared tonight. So just really strengthening those communication channels and making sure that parents, families, and students have access to different information and there's ongoing communication. Next slide. All right, that was the last one on that. So at this point, we'll open it up to see if there are any clarifying questions, anything that anyone's wondering about, or just comments, anything that we could fill you in on.
And I just wanted to give an offering. I know that that was a lot of information. So as we go into the next part, if you feel like you need to stand up, stretch, or do any of those pieces, you know, part of that engaging in community and in productive conversations, you also have to connect your head, your body, and your heart. So being able to move, adjust, that allows for more productive conversation as well. So I want to offer that to all of you. If you need to stretch, you can do so while others are chatting or talking.
Tara and John, I do have a question. I was hoping that you could expand a little bit more because I'm wondering when the request for students to be involved in the evaluation specifically, and also in the feedback, I'm wondering what that looks like or what it might look like. You started talking about it, but I'm struggling with picturing it. So can you help me out?
Erin, I missed the beginning of your question. Students wanting to be involved with what? Could you ask it again, please?
Yeah. first, wanting to be involved in the evaluation of an officer or of the program. I guess that's it. I'm not quite sure if it's of the program or of the officer or both. And then also the feedback. What in asking for a feedback opportunity, I'm wondering what it might look like.
Well, similar to what John and I did, it could be as simple as some listening sessions where you have some prompts asking students about their experiences with the SROs, specifically around their relationship, or whatever the objectives of the program are. Also, you could even do some surveying of students. I've seen processes where, when it comes to the actual evaluation, that is the job of the supervisor. But folks have opportunities to do surveys and provide feedback that then the supervisor, and in this case, the school district, would have access to, and it helps to inform them in terms of that evaluation process. But it's just a matter of actually taking the time to ask for stakeholders' feedback and giving them a chance to share both positive, negative, or neutral comments, but just feedback.
Yeah, and I also want to offer too, very similar to some of the data sets that we sent out as part of the artifacts, the surveys, the opportunities for students to host their own listening sessions and share that feedback. I think those can all be forms of data feedback that I think you're talking about, Director Emerson. Okay, and then I see here Councilwoman Brooks.
Well, thank you, and thank you for all of the work, and thanks to everyone and all the stakeholders that were involved. It sounds like a really comprehensive kind of beginning. I had a couple questions. One of the questions I had was, I have been talking to interested constituents who are parents of children at the schools. One of the reflections that I had was about the survey itself that they received, that they thought that questions were sort of, I don't want to say exactly biased, but it was just kind of about very reinforcing the program itself. And they, think that the student resource officers are great, but some of the questions they didn't really feel left themselves open for deeper communication about their feelings about having the program at the schools. So I'm just curious if we could get a copy of that survey. I don't see one in my packet. The other question that I had was around when we're talking about dialogue building. I mean, for me, I have a social work perspective, and I'm a community practice social worker by education. So the first thing that jumps up for me is the need for a needs assessment of the people that we're serving, which I know there's a lot of different, we have the teachers, we have a lot of different stakeholders, but as far as a student-centered needs assessment and exactly the outcome measures that we're looking at so that we can actually have change. And from what I understand, which isn't really clear to me, I think that the prioritized problem seems to be drugs, substance abuse. And I'm curious about the perspective as well around a behavioral health perspective, long-term outcome measures, not just short-term prevention and prohibition, but change in thoughts and behaviors around those instances. Other comments that I had come up with, I have a lot of them, actually, I'm sorry, but we've talked a lot about students of color, which I think is really important. But I also think that women have it and girls have a different perspective around heavily armed, especially men, people with mental and behavioral health challenges and traumas. are really important to consider. And so those are some of the things. And then the overall issue around power differentials. You know, when we have, and I'm on the Community Police Foundation for Tualatin. I've worked with police officers as a social worker in good, strong partnerships. And I also know the different roles very clearly in what my role is, what my training is. And so some of the conversation around communication, people that have training in therapy and listening skills and those types of things, it seems like with, I might be wrong, but with a focus on substance abuse, that there's a lot around the addiction model that could be considered as we're considering not only the problem statement, but also what the outcomes and the solutions look like. So those are some of the questions I've got, because although I like the dialogue process with the resource officers and the students, I would also like to see a social work perspective beforehand for students to be able to really get a needs assessment for what we actually need here in our schools. And then I guess I'd further like to understand the definition of resources. And I've talked about this before with our chief, because my background, if you're doing resource and referrals, you're referring people to resources. You're not the resource person. So I'd like to have a better clarification even of what the title is. Those are just a few questions. I have more questions, but somebody else should talk. And I don't expect all those questions to be answered. I just think I want to put them in the pot.
Thank you. I appreciate those questions. And one thing I will say, because I too want to get to other questions, but just I specifically appreciate especially appreciate the student needs assessment, because one of the things that was clear in this process for John and I is that the perception of the adults compared to the perception of students, they don't always align, and at times are at odds in terms of how students are perceiving the officers and issues of safety and what they think is most needed in the schools.
Thank you. And I just also want to talk about bias really quickly, not just for folks of color, but people who, what people face. As far as normalizing police, I think it can be good as long as it's done well. And there's also biases around getting help for mental health, behavioral health issues. So those biases are also very real with what seems to be the main problem that our resource officers are there to tackle. I'm not sure if there's a bunch of violence and other things that I don't understand. But as far as the behavioral health issues and some of the things I think about. Thanks.
Thank you.
So I appreciate your making the connection. So we're focusing a lot around the impacts on students and families of color, but you're also connecting that with other students are impacted both positively and negatively as well, and bringing up, girls and women. How are they impacted by school resource officers, and those who are dealing with trauma? How are they impacted? And part of what we do when we highlight the experiences of students of color and families of color is also connect that to others who are not the students that are interacting every day in positive way with school resource officers. So I just appreciate you bringing that up.
I appreciate that. And my actual thing too is also a mother, a parent. So that feels intimidated by police officers as well. So FYI.
Thank you. And it looks like Council President Nancy Grimes. Go ahead. And I think you're on mute still.
I beg your pardon. I'm sorry about that. Thank you for the presentation. I had many sort of eye-opening wow moments listening to the information that you've gathered. So it's very valuable to me, and it raises a lot of very interesting questions. And thank you, Councilor Brooks, for your input. Your background is really invaluable in these situations. But my specific question is, you mentioned that at Tualatin High School, there is a Washington County juvenile representative there that helps make referrals for student behaviors to the DA. Why isn't there one at Tigard? And does that inherently say something to the kids at Tualatin about the process itself if Tualatin is deemed to need a Washington County juvenile officer, but Tigard isn't? So I'd be interested to know the history in that and why one high school has it and the other does not. Thank you.
That's a great question. And we shared it from the frame of what was perceived at Tualatin High School. So as Tara and I were listening, we don't have the definitive answer there. Is there a Washington County Juvenile Department representative who spends time at Tigard High School or at Tualatin High School? These are questions that are important questions, but I'm not sure that Tara and I could answer them, from our listening sessions. Maybe somebody from the school district or the police departments could answer that question, for you.
I'll take a shot at that.
Are we wanting answers right now? Okay, go ahead.
So in Oregon, and I'm just going to try to summarize this a little bit. Anytime a juvenile is involved in an issue that, if it was an adult, would be kind of a criminal matter, all of those situations that police officers in Oregon handle, those are all referred to the juvenile department. And then the juvenile department will make that decision on which will be referred to the juvenile district attorney assigned, and then ultimately potentially before the judge that's assigned to the juvenile court. So anytime we're dealing with a juvenile, we always refer those to the juvenile department. Now, the Washington County Juvenile Department does have a staff member assigned at the high school in Tualatin. Historically, a lot of times they worked out of our police department just for the sheer proximity of making sure that service was available to the south end of the county in a timely manner. So they kind of migrated away from the police department and into the high school as kind of a pilot program over the last couple of years. So I can't really talk specifically about that program, but it's not unusual for a police officer to refer something to the Washington County Juvenile Department. That's pretty standard anytime a police officer is dealing with a juvenile. So hopefully that answers at least some of it.
And the only thing I would add is that there's been an interest to do that at Tigard High. There has not been enough resources to date to replicate the pilot partnership.
And can I just clarify? Sorry, I'm trying to wrap my head around this a little bit. So the pilot partnership is basically designed to have interventions outside of the criminal justice system for students when issues arise. Is that basically the premise?
Yeah, and it's also tied to the LIFT program as that preventative, building the partnership between juvenile and schools to better strengthen and keep kids out of that pipeline in more of a proactive and preventative way. So that person, John Biles, that is at Tualatin, also works with the re-engagement team.
Got it. Thank you.
I think Chief Mcalpine maybe should comment on the Tigard part of this. I don't think that this isn't, it's not that it's not happening at Tigard. I just don't think it's done with co-located staff. But Chief Mcalpine or Commander Rogers, you want to comment on that?
That's correct, Mayor. We don't have staff. We still do make our referrals. And so you'll see oftentimes the SRO will write it up and refer it to Washington County Juvenile. They just don't have staff on hand to make a determination right there on the spot. And Commander McDonald, if you have anything else to add.
No, that's exactly what happens. And oftentimes as a part of the juvenile process, to piggyback on what both of the chiefs have said, the juvenile process is very different than the adult process, and very, very often, in fact, way more often than not, they are referred to a juvenile counselor, and it is more of a diversion program than anything else. So that really ultimately is what the outcome becomes. Is it goes to the juvenile counselors under advisement from the district attorney that's assigned to the juvenile department, but very often it's more of a diversion program than anything else.
I have a clarifying question related to the LIFT program and the vetted corrections officer at Tualatin High School, and that is, have we seen, we talked about that our district's contributing to the disparities in our youth going to the juvenile system. Do we see a difference between the Tualatin program and the Tigard program? I don't know if that came up, because I was having a little trouble understanding the data because I wasn't involved in the committee, the definitions around things. And so I don't know, was that brought up at all? Is that we have a lot of success with that program and it's showing in the data for our referrals to the legal system?
I'd be happy to take a stab at that. So both of the police departments actually did a pretty deep dive into the statistics in terms of referrals of students to the juvenile department, and what groups that those came from and where the referrals came from. And the vast majority of those actually were referrals from school staff. And I don't have the specifics right off the top of my head. They're actually on the district's website and available. I could probably look those up, unless Zinnia, I don't know if you have those available, or if they're I don't think they're part of this presentation tonight, are they?
They're not, but they are part of the artifacts links. So I had the Tigard Police Department report and the Tualatin. So I can share that. I think Director Fox, you can see those actually in the artifacts at the end of their reports. They're both there.
Well, and thank you for that. I did look at the data. I just didn't understand it because Tualatin was so much higher. It's kind of opposite of what I would have thought. And maybe I'm reading the data wrong, and that's why I wanted to talk to somebody about the data, because it wasn't lining up with what I had expected to see. And I just didn't know if that came up in any conversations or not. But matter of fact, the arrests, again, I may be misreading the data, seemed a lot higher at Tualatin than they were at Tigard High School. So I just want some context, because I'm guessing that I'm not reading the data correctly. But I don't expect us to dive deep there. It was just, I wanted to throw out that question because I think it's important moving forward that we understand the success of the LIFT program. And I've actually participated in various classes and whatnot. And I would love to see us expand that, our learning. And perhaps maybe there's an opportunity for the SROs to take on some of the responsibilities that the current Washington County corrections officer takes on. So I just talked to him before this meeting. So I just wanted his input, and he thought there were some real opportunities from all this. So that's all I want to say. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. And let's say we have about 2 more minutes for this section. And then I saw Emily, your hand up. Did you want to share something?
Yeah, I was looking over, well, I am right now, but do you differentiate in the data between reporting from administrators and staff, like teachers? So when you're collecting, like, where you get the recommendations from?
Emily, are you talking specifically about the data from both police departments?
Yes.
Okay,
sorry.
Yeah, no worries. I'm gonna go ahead and offer space for Commander McDonald and Chief Steele or Officer Miller to share if you would like to.
Yeah, I'll jump in there. Typically, how we pull that data is that sometimes that the referral comes from a teacher, but ultimately the admin handling the case will contact us, and then we'll kind of work together as far as doing that investigation. And if it turns out that it needs to be referred, then that's how it works out. But typically, it's one of the school administrators that gets a hold of us.
And that's the same at Tigard. It's almost, and we don't differentiate if it's a school staff member or an administrator. If it's a member of the staff is all inclusive. We don't differentiate. And like Brian said, it most commonly is a school administrator that's reaching out to the SRO with that referral, and even if it was a staff member that brought it to their attention. So
I'm wondering because from what I've seen and what I hear in the community review, it seems like there's a differentiation, like staff, as in teachers and students, view SROs in the same way. A little bit of they're a bit confused about they need some clarity about the role of SROs, while administrators seem to have a very clear view of what SROs are used for. And so perhaps the differentiation between the reporting from the teacher and the reporting from the administrator affects how other people, how we see how students see the process, because teachers may be confused about that process and not be able to guide them through it. And so it seems a little bit more scary and mysterious, while for administrators, as something that they deal with more commonly, that they might make students view it in a different way. I hope that makes sense.
Emily, thank you so much. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think that actually offers a good bridge to the next part of the presentation, which is talking about potential opportunities and next steps here that needs to get, I think, finished. So Tara and John, I think you have a couple more slides here, and then we'll get to the discussion component.
Oh, I guess the slides are out of order. Sorry about that. So some more along the opportunities and possible next steps. And this does segue to what Emily was saying. The administrators in the listening sessions most definitely had a clearer understanding of the SRO's roles, and that's because in the buildings, they are the ones who, according to the feedback we receive, interact most with them. And one thing that was interesting about that is the consistency. It differed between buildings exactly what those roles were, but the administrators were the one who worked most closely with the SROs as compared to staff. In some of the buildings, there were staff who had close relationships with the SROs and relied on them quite a bit, especially staff who worked with students and with dealt with more of the behavioral issues, and it seemed to be positive. But beyond that, staff were not as clear on the roles of SROs. And so one of the things based on the feedback, the opportunities that we shared is when appropriate, provide performance expectations and training to help administrators and staff address their fear of students and reduce the over-reliance on SROs to handle students. This again goes to the question of what is the role of SROs? Are they there for law enforcement or to be resources to the community and build relationships with students in a more community policing sort of way? And one of the issues is if they become the ones that administrators call on to handle scary or tough situations, then that impacts students' perception and also just their role, just by nature of them being called on for those sorts of things more often. It defines the role in the eyes of students. And so that was one of the things that we think warrants more conversation in the district. Is there another slide or is?
Yeah, and I think we're at the questions and discussion, and parts of the questions were asked, and I apologies, Councilwoman Brooks. It looked like we were also heading into some answering as well. So I know I wanted to make sure we went back and addressed some of your questions. So the survey, I'm happy to actually include just a copy of that into the packet to resend out, or even just have that available in our SRO website for our department, for our district. And then the other two questions that you had, well, a few questions. I think that actually will be part of the discussion as we talk about like next steps in regards to, you know, how encompassing and what part of, you know, the whole child, the whole community, when we talk about mental health, SEL, and all these other pieces. So if you're okay with that, we can move on to the discussion, and that might actually be addressed as part of the conversation. Does that work?
Yes, I appreciate it. Yeah, a biopsychosocial perspective.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, John and Tara, I think let's hold. I think we have 20 minutes for this section, if needed.
Well, this is really your opportunity to engage in discussion, and questions that you have, not just for us in the process, but questions for each other, questions about some of the opportunities, questions about some of the structural changes, just questions and discussion about what's coming up for you around our report in relation to the whole process that we've been involved with through the partnership. This is your opportunity to really engage and discuss with each other, and for Tara and I to be helpful in that process.
Mayor Snyder?
So I'm going to jump in here. I think I'm most struck by maybe the lack of like formal structure around the program. And I think back to my time in high school, which was not in Oregon, but had some law enforcement presence on the campus. And I think it was kind of just as laissez-faire as I'm gathering this has become. I think it started with good intentions. And I think most people are trying to do their best, but in a maybe not as well thought through and planned system as perhaps it should be. And in 2020, it's just not acceptable that we don't have objectives, outcomes, metrics, and a clear sort of identified path and desire for our community and what this type of a program is supposed to be delivering. So I would encourage us to be thinking about that. And I think there frankly are some guideposts that we should consider. I was particularly struck by Dr. McCall's comments in one of the listening sessions I was or the only listening session that I was able to participate as just a listener in during this process. And what struck me was her descriptions of her experience as a principal, and then as a supervisor of other principals, and now in her role here. And I think she did a similar role in another district, that particularly at the elementary level, and I'm using this as an illustration, but it seems to me like there are some guideposts and or guardrails that should not be and do not need to be sort of. Let me give an example, because I'm sure I'm not communicating very clearly right now. But her description, which really struck me, was how often or how she could predict with almost 100% certainty the race of a child based on a principal at an elementary school calling for a school resource officer to help with a behavioral problem. And it struck me because of her experience and background, and the fact that as I think about elementary age children, of which I've got one now and have just had two others, move through that, there is really very little reason, unless there's a weapon involved or something, that an elementary school administrator should probably need the help for the behavior of an elementary age child. And the reason I bring that up is that's an example of the kind of thing that I think systematically we probably need to be talking about, because I don't think they belong at the elementary school for that kind of a purpose. Again, unless, we've got a 5th grader with a firearm or something. Otherwise, I just like this behavioral, we need help kind of thing. I think there's a whole list of sort of guardrails to this program that probably are appropriate. And I would put that forward as one example.
Thank you, Emilio.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, how does something that's been brought up a lot with SROs is that they're important for substance use in high school. But I was just going to ask, how does that role change with the decriminalization of drugs in Oregon? Because would it be appropriate for like a criminal response to a non-criminal offense? I don't know if that's completely accurate, but I just wanted to ask about it.
This is Officer Nunn. The decriminalization of drugs won't affect juveniles because juveniles are exempt from that. That's just for adults.
Thank you.
Thank you. Emily?
Yeah, to add to Mayor Snyder's question, I do remember Principal Russ from Creekside Community High School talking about how it was very intentional for Creekside to not have SROs. So I'm wondering, or I've been wondering, the intention behind that and the reasoning behind that, and why we have it in our high schools but not at Creekside. I'm sure there's a difference because it's an alternative high school, but I think that will add value to our conversation.
I had a question back onto the mental health, behavioral health perspective as well. What other, there were two things that came up for me, just what the overlap is, if there's behavioral health specialists, how are they differentiated from the SRO roles? And I'd like to know more about that. And I think the way that I'd like to lean into Mayor Snyder's point, the way I'd like to know about it is through actual metrics and role, like delineated roles. That to me is a really important question. And the other thing that's interesting when we're talking about referrals to counselors for diversion, about looking at outcome measures between that and regular behavioral health referrals and referrals to treatment, and what those kind of outcomes and how they're different to the students as far as, creating engagement. It's very concerning to me that we have disparities between our two cities. And it sounds like our city's not on the right side of that. And so I have questions about that as well. And just wondering if anybody knows those answers.
Zinnia, this is Dr. Sue. Relative to your questions, Counselor Brooks, Carol Kinch, our Director of Student Services, has joined us this evening and can certainly speak to the work that is available, or behavioral work that is available at schools, as well as the fact that the district has invested well over $3 million in additional social emotional supports and personnel through the Student Success Act this year. But I'll stop there, and if Director Kinch is with us, she can more fully flesh that out. And then Director Unn, if we could circle back to Emily's question relative to the differences between Creekside and Tualatin and Tigard, and perhaps Director Fields can help us with that one.
Hi, I am here. I welcome
everybody. So regarding our mental health and counseling program, so all of our schools have counselors and school psychologists in them. As appropriate, a lot of our work is focused on prevention. We're spending a lot of time working on creating communities that are supportive of students' well-being. So we're doing a lot of social emotional learning and circle restorative practices within our classrooms. And then when issues do arise, we have a positive behavior program called PBIS, where we track data on students, and we meet monthly and we look to find students who need extra support. And so when students need extra support, we call on our counselors, our school psychologists. Sometimes we have some behavior specialists that will come in and support the teachers and students. And then during acute situations where someone might need something ASAP, we have our school psychologists and our counselors. In addition to that, we have care coordinators that serve K-12, and they work with our counselors to make sure that students and families get referred to mental health services. We have school-based health centers therapist, and then we have a LifeWorks therapist and a youth contact therapist. So depending on the situation, there are resources available for students. I think that captures most of it.
Yeah. And I'm just curious about the overlap with them and the SROs, and also if they were involved in this process.
They overlap in individual situations at times where they might work together as a team if a student or a family is really struggling. And I don't believe, Director Unn could fill in, but I don't believe the larger group was part of this. Perhaps a counselor was. I haven't been part of the whole thing.
Yes, so we had an opportunity for actually folks on the behavior team to be a part of the focus group, as that did come up from the community around some areas of focus, as Councilwoman Brooks had highlighted, and also the conversation that Dr. Sue brought up around the Student Success Act and the Student Investment Account recommendations. We did a community process, and getting family partnership advocates. We had prioritized mental health supports and restorative practices and all those other pieces that did come up from the Student Success Act, as well as part of our network of services. We also have our basic needs team that works in partnership with student services, trauma-informed specialists, and SEL facilitator in student services around proactive preventative services and supports for families as well as students. And so there are some network pieces here that we're talking about. And I think as part of the process is highlighted, there are more opportunities to make those connections. As we know, a disconnected system is a system that breeds inequities. And so as a district, we are trying to connect those dots so that we are supporting families in a more concerted effort and in a more concerted way. And I think that's part of the things that I think as we've gone through this process is highlighted as an area of need, as well as I think from our partners, from City of Tigard and City of Tualatin, they've all highlighted the interest and desire to partner in those ways as well. So that's a little bit of that information. I hope that helps give some clarity. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that was very helpful. And I also, think about self-regulation techniques and things as well, especially when some of it's behavioral health that people get concerned about. But again, I also, yeah, I'm still working out my thoughts, but thank you for the information.
Thank you. And then Director Fields, Emily, I know that we kind of went past that a little bit. Do you mind posing your question one more time so that we can help answer that? And then we have Director Bowman, and then we're going to close this segment of our conversation.
Right. So Principal Russ Ramos said at the community review about how Creekside doesn't have SROs in its building. And he said that decision was very intentional. And Creekside, if most of you know, but Creekside is an alternative high school. And so I would like to know the intention behind the decision to not have SROs in the high school. And perhaps that is applicable or somehow relates to Tigard Tualatin high schools as well.
So I cannot speak to, specifically why the administrators made that decision, but I can speak to what we heard from administrators and staff from that building. And I will say, John, I'm going off recollection. So with all humility, if I misspeak or leave something out, please do feel free to interject. But my understanding was there were concerns that for students on that campus in particular, it may be particularly triggering to have officers in the building just based on their experiences and their approach to the students and the relationships that they build or that the staff build with the students. Their goal is to make it so that the staff can handle any situations that come up. And from the staff perspective, actually, this was one place where we kind of consistently heard strong feedback in favor of the SROs, because in those rare instances where a student either is in danger of harming themselves or others in the building, and those rare instances that the teachers or staff can't handle it, they will call in an SRO. And they were very appreciative of the SROs because those were situations where the SROs, they felt, went above and beyond to build relationships with students and to understand their situations and circumstances and respond appropriately. And those were also comments where people shared that when they called and they didn't get the SRO and they just got whoever was in the neighborhood, it often did not turn out well, and that they preferred not to call those officers just because there was a lack of relationship and understanding of how they handle things in that building. There were still concerns, however, of what the presence of officers did for students, particularly students of color, and the perception of them being called in as a punitive measure. John, is there anything that you would like to add from that?
I heard that as well. And also several of the staff felt unsafe in the presence of SROs as well. So it wasn't just, students or just students of color. It was, some of the staff as well. And this is the complexity. Some of them really valued those times when the SRO came and intervened and de-escalated and supported. So it's very, very complex, but that's what we learned.
Thank you for that, John, because I think that does need to be pointed out, because that does speak to why they don't have them assigned or don't request them to be assigned to the building. It's because of their discomfort as well with the officers, but still that recognition that in unique circumstances, they can be helpful when they have the right relationships with the staff and students.
I have a follow-up question to that. I'm not sure if I should wait out my turn, but.
So Emily, I'm not sure Director Fields had a chance to respond. So, and then maybe after that, you can go with your follow-up question.
I wouldn't say I have much more to add. I think this also just goes to how there's been a historical relationship that's just been continuing over time without thinking about context of the site. So for the specific to Creekside, who has actually gone through just really a intentional, what is their vision, what is their purpose, what is their mission, what is their culture, without the SRO program, probably going through that same kind of iteration, how it currently exists would not match the culture working to be established at Creekside. So I don't want to say that it couldn't or that couldn't be a thought. I think this goes to the fact that we haven't consistently evaluated the program and thought about context and then adjusted the partnership accordingly. So, this could be an opportunity like that, but for a school like Creekside that's working to be a true community school, it would just take a very intentional and contextual approach to a partnership there. But again, I think this highlights that gap of evaluating it, looking at it, as opposed to just allowing it to sort of continue as is and remain at that status quo without an intentional, shift to it if it is appropriate to be at all 3 sites.
Thank you, Director Fields. And then Emily, you can ask your follow-up question. Then we're going to close out with Vice Chair Bowman.
Right. So when SROs respond, are those like SROs from Tigard or from when they respond at situations in Creekside? I think you're getting where I'm coming from. I'm just wondering where those officers come from, whether they're from Tigard, and how you work out that sort of situation where you deem officers need to come in.
So Creekside's in the city of Tigard. So typically when Creekside calls, they would call one of Tigard's SROs directly and we would respond. Typically it's the high school SRO because we're right down the street.
Great. Thank you, Emily. Vice Chair Bowman.
Thanks, Zinnia. I just wanted to offer one. I really appreciated the way Mayor Snyder sort of introduced the idea of having more structure, and I appreciated Councilor Brooks' comments as well. I wanted to add a layer to it and say that one of my priorities from the district level is consistency across both programs at both Tigard and Tualatin High School. Because I think right now there's, everything from, what a job posting for the position looks like, to how the positions are interviewed and whether there's a principal involved or students involved, to how the respective departments participate in district investigations, whether police investigations or district investigations. I think consistency across all of those things is really useful. But also acknowledge that each of us have autonomy over our respective entities. So it will probably require more collaboration, but I think that's one of the things that was illuminated for me in this process is some of the differences across not just the high schools, but how our district interacts with both departments. That would be beneficial if we could systematize.
Thank you, Vice Chair Bowman. And actually, there was a question that I think kind of got answered from Director Kinch. Not a panelist, but attendees had asked about having partnerships with officers and teacher staffing around specific needs, and are they part of an intervention team in regarding student achievement and behavior. And I think Director Kinch kind of talked about it. Depending on the need of the students, partnerships are developed in that way. Did you have anything to add about that, Director Kinch?
Yeah, I would say that on individual basis, sometimes our school resource officers are part of what we call a wraparound team. There are a very small percentage of students who need people from the community in their life, and so they are sometimes part of those teams. I would also add, being also the director of special education, our school resource officers do, while we haven't put it on paper, they do tend to have a relationship with our staff that work with our students who have social emotional disabilities and families, because those school resource officers develop relationships with the families and the students and can respond differently than a officer that is just called on the emergency or non-emergency line. And to answer the question about counselors, we have about, I think the ratio at high school is 1 to 330, and middle school is about 1 to 500, and elementary is 1 to 600. I would also add we have school psychologists in all of our buildings in addition to the counselors, and at the high school we have therapists through LifeWorks and Youth Contact.
Thank you. And then we'll be moving on to the next part after Council President Goodhouse. Let's see that your hands up.
Yes, thank you.
Yep.
One additional comment, and I agree with all the comments said before, with more clarity between with SROs and the school district. But with watching all the different conversations that were going on, one of the biggest things that came up was from the public.
Oh, I think we lost you, unless it's just me.
I lost Councilor Goodhouse as well.
A lot of questions being asked, and a lot of time spent on that, but never really answered, or the officers or SRO officer can answer it. But going forward, after it gets worked out between the school district and the two different departments, Tigard and Tualatin Police Department, is a clear outline of really what the SRO officers do and don't do. I think would really help with the public, because that kept coming up if people didn't know what they did, what their involvement was there, or even why they had equipment on themselves or why they had a firearm. And so once that is cleared up between those two different agencies, some clear, concise education, or even maybe diagrams or something in multiple languages that show, here's what is a vest, and here's why these things are on here. Someone may look at a vest and think that that's all full of weapons or something like that, but maybe doesn't realize maybe it's a flashlight and notepads. What goes in there and why they're there and what that does. But that's one of the biggest things I saw, is a lot of time was spent people asking and not knowing a lot of the details. So once we get that figured out, really a clear communication plan.
Thank you for that, Council President Goodhouse. That actually is a wonderful transition to the next part of this presentation that I think would be really important for us to lean into. So we've had an opportunity to hear from our facilitators, John and Tara, around what they've heard, a summary of the information that the communities and stakeholders had offered. I want to bring back to our discussion today around our equity lens. Does this decision, or the decision that we're going to be making, well, not we, but the board, does this decision align with the district mission and vision? I think we've been calibrating a little bit about that tonight, as well as the last few months. Who does the decision affect, both positively and negatively? I think you can see from the content and the information that was shared with you today, the question around SROs and programs is pretty complex, and you saw feedback that presented both, and a lot of things in between. Does the decision being made ignore or worsen existing disparities or produce other unintended consequences? The depth of or the process by which we collected information and data from the community and their voices and their lived experiences offer some very poignant questions to be answered, as well as opportunities to address. Are those affected by the decisions included in the process? And again, with the help of the community and the process by which we explore together, I believe that with the recommendations and what we currently have learned in TTSD around the best way to engage our community is through ongoing processes, and also very persistent measures of engaging and connecting with the community. And so we do believe that we have included folks, but just as Councilwoman Brooks said, the work is, it's a really good start, because as everybody had highlighted, giving information one time is not enough. it's that ongoing connection, engagement, partnership with the community and with those those stakeholders. Those are the pieces that have seen to be promising. What are other possibilities to be explored, and is the decision or process sustainable? And I'm reminded by some of the pieces of our listening sessions where it was our students that really brought forth this idea of how do we really tackle this decision with sustainability in mind. I heard from a few students that said it would be easy to say yes or no for the moment, but then what happens to what happens in the future and so forth. And so having those pieces in mind is very important. And I wanted to give about 5 minutes or so for our partners to kind of share this process. If there is anything that you wanted to offer to folks here today in regards to how the experience has been for you, this is your time to share. So our partners in Tigard and Tualatin Police Departments, cabinet leadership, if you have anything that you wanted to share about the process that you wanted others to know. We have 4 minutes now.
Zinnia, I'll go ahead and just speak for a couple minutes here.
Okay.
Again, just want to thank everybody for their collaboration, their listening. This was a pretty long, extensive effort to even get to you today with hopefully maybe a recommendation. But there's a lot of takeaways that I know from the police department, the role that we play, the uncertainty, but I just want to express the fact that we're in it. We're in it for the long haul. We're in it to listen and collaborate because our youth is our future and we're willing to invest in it and be at the table. So again, I just want to thank Tualatin, but also the school district and Zinnia and our facilitators for a collaborative process, for our youth who participated and let their voices be heard. You were heard. And I just look forward to continuing this dialogue and hopefully a new and reimagined SRO program.
And I can also share too from the district perspective, this is Dr. McCall, is that trusting the process and having John and Tara to facilitate some of the stakeholder meetings and listening sessions, and us always grounding ourselves in protocols, like we shared at board chair Wolf shared the art of community, and we all identified what we were going to commit to. Those processes were clearly present during this process, as well as the equity lens, that a tool that you can't, it's just not on paper and it's not on the screen, but it's something that we lean into, particularly around those difficult times when we had different stakeholders that had different lived experiences from one another, sharing those, and where we're saying, let's stay in protocol and be able to listen with care as folks shared. So for me, again, trusting that process, that we're not gonna have an answer right away, or we're just going to lean into the process to come up with some recommendations for the board.
Hey, Zinnia, I would just like to add, again, just from the police perspective, you know, I know Tigard is no different when I say that we have staff assigned as SROs that are committed and passionate about what they do every single day. And they're in those positions because they care about the kids that they're serving, because that's ultimately what we are. We are public servants here to provide a service. And we always want to do our best in that. And when we hear the lived experiences that people have, we can't overlook those or not listen to those lived experiences. So it's important for us to take a pause like we are now and maybe even a step back to kind of reassess what we were doing and how we were doing our jobs every day. Because if we don't do that, we're never going to continue to move forward. So I'll be honest, it's been a difficult process in a lot of ways for us, but it's been a positive experience as well. So I'm thankful that we've had the opportunity to engage in some of these conversations. And like Chief Mcalpine said, we're committed. We're in this because that's what we're here to do, is serve this community. And that's all of the community. It's not just select portions of our community. So again, thank you for allowing us to be part of this process.
And Zinnia, I wish to offer my thanks to Mayors Snyder and Bubnik and to your city managers for their immediate accessibility to me in late June when this concern raised to prominence, and a willingness, not just a willingness, but a deep desire to have substantive conversation about what the next steps could be. And then specifically Mayor Snyder to the City of Tigard for providing resource for our facilitators. Really very meaningful and deep, purposeful collaboration and partnership. And I'm so very grateful to both cities, to our SRO partners, to the city manager, Sherilyn Lombos, to former city manager, Marty Wine, and now to Kathy Nyland, and to Chief Mcalpine and Chief Steele, for willingness to use Dr. McCall's language to stay in the process and run a full process, and that brings us here to this evening. So my thanks to both cities, to mayors and to the city council and city police departments and to counselors who are here with us this evening.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and project my screen again. Hopefully everybody can see. If I can just get some folks thumbs up, that would be great. Awesome. Thank you so much. So as I had highlighted earlier, and very similar to what other partners have highlighted as well, we have gone through a comprehensive process to start this conversation in a deeper, meaningful way. We've had data sets from our insight survey, listening sessions and focus groups, student survey and student recommendations, and our SRO review committee. We've learned a lot at TTSD around how to solve complex problems as part of our equity work. And part of that work, similar to our hate speech process and hate speech policy, is after hearing from our community, we need to do a crosswalk around what are the things across our stakeholders, across our community that people are highlighting as areas of focus that we as partners, as well as we as a district, need to review. So again, Dr. McCall and I are going to read through these pieces. Dr. McCall, did you want to start? And then I'll read with you.
Sure. So some of the themes across data sets were relationship development with students and families, with an intentional focus on our underserved communities, and also with our students with disabilities and students that are navigating houselessness, as well as health and safety. And again, health and safety, it's different for different folks and the expectations. So we heard that loud and clear. What makes one group feel safe might not make another stakeholder group feel safe.
Right, and I wanted to add to that, again, highlighting some of the physical definitions of health and safety, and also very similar to what many of you have highlighted here, what is the social, emotional, mental health and well-being safety as well, falling under that category. The other part of that is transparency and understanding of SRO's role in community. Some themes that came out was wanting to have a broad communication to staff, students and families and community, but also locally outreach and communication plans for ongoing calibration and understanding of the scope of work. And what we've, I think, learned here, as well as you heard from John and Tara in regards to just the support for ongoing, outreach and understanding across stakeholders, requires that deep commitment to outreach. And so that was part of the crosswalk around all 4 datas.
Yeah, and also what came out is our need to address the impact of SRO's uniform and gear that seem to be more militarized. And I know we heard from students and saying, why do our SROs have to wear their gear? And could they dress a different way? As well as the need for professional development, particularly development that's trauma-informed, anti-racist, and training around implicit biases. And again, biases doesn't have to be intentional. It is, we all have biases that we bring with us each and every day. And then as well as community outreach, specifically students and families from our underserved communities of color.
Yes, and I wanted to highlight too, in partnership, we've learned a lot around SRO programs that I personally have never learned or understood, and to be able to have opportunities for that understanding with the community is part of that community outreach as well, in regards to having time devoted and related to that outreach, and working in partnership with schools, administrators, staff, on how to ensure that that is possible. Director Fields, was there anything that you wanted to add in regards to, I know that we went by and you didn't get a chance to share kind of your thoughts as this partnership rolled out? Regarding the process?
I don't know that there's much new. I just appreciated the chance to have, I think there was really a shift when we really found the space to honor the lived experience and recognize how complex it is from the various perspectives, and just really an opportunity to, I believe as one of the mayors said, get really clear on our outcomes, our intentions, what we're measuring, what is really the intent and purpose, and align everything accordingly. So again, just appreciated how to go slow to go fast, which I think was really challenging from a variety of perspectives in this process. But I think the fact that everyone stayed in it and stayed through the messy to get to that other end of better understanding, deeper understanding, I think is going to better serve all, and most specifically our students and community as a result of the process. So that's all I would add.
Thank you. And I would add to that too, just also in the collaboration for us to go far in regards to the sustainability as well. So that brings us to this point where Dr. McCall, if you would like to read the recommendation.
But so our recommendation, again, I'm going to read this. It is based on the feedback from listening sessions, interviews, community and student surveys, and the community review process. It is the recommendation of the partners to continue with a newly structured SRO program. Additionally, we recommend that TTSD convene a steering committee, which includes representation from TTSD district administrators, building administrators, staff, students, Tigard Police Department, Tualatin Police Department, our families, and TTSD's community partners from community-based organization. And the suggested timeline for completing this process we propose is April of the 1st, 2021. And then special attention will be given to creating opportunities in the program where SROs will meet regularly with student affinity groups, attend school assemblies for introductions and explanations of their roles, be present at staff meetings, to create a new level of partnership with the staff, and be accessible to parents through scheduled meeting times, such as during school conference times or community engagement opportunities.
Okay, and that brings us to the next part where the board engages in discussion and offers direction to staff. Chair Wolf, on to you.
Well, I just want to thank again everybody. It was a great conversation, and I just felt the whole evening was a series of really important questions, but certainly not a direction of one of stopping a program, but one of serious, thoughtful questions of how we do process improvement and really engage and do this well. And so that was just really very appreciative for me to hear, and just want to thank everybody again for their thoughtful feedback. And so I support this recommendation. I think it's spot on, and I will at this point open it up to my fellow board members for their feedback.
I do have a clarifying question that I asking if the steering committee is creating the new structure or creating the contract, or are they part of the evaluation, or all of the above, or just what's the scope of the steering committee?
Director Emerson, I would share with you that the scope of this committee is to provide, is to come together to provide recommendations for a contract that will come back to the board. And you see here suggested timeline for completion of that process as April 1, and then bring forward a contract that addresses the concerns that have been outlined this evening with strategies and recommendations, and then bring that back to the board for review, discussion, and vote for either approval or send it back for revision.
So, Dr. Ricky Smith, is it your intention then that that recommendation will include, say, what training might look like, what co-training opportunities might look like, what, how the role of the SRO would be defined better for the community and for students? Is that the sort of thing that committee?
Correct. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Director Zierschmidt. Exactly. And I think, and Director Emerson, to your concern relative, your question relative to evaluation, again, it's about providing, as Tara and John have shared with us this evening, how we build feedback loops that then inform evaluations, not just for the SRO program, but certainly for the district performance as well.
And also, just to clarify too, parts of this, and partners feel free to chime in as well, is that they're very similar to, again, our community processes. We would have a smaller team that can help draft and review all that we've done so far. Our partners have after every community session, after every conversation, we've come together and really talked through the data, the information. I know that our partners, have highlighted things that they have already brainstorms and ideas around. And so the the other parts of the communities and staff and students, they would offer, again, very similar to our community process, would offer a feedback loop around, are we getting it right, aligned to what we're seeing from our community. This is what we heard from the community. Here's how we have drafted this plan. Bring it back to them, have them offer feedback, and then that's part of that process, very similar to our SIA process and our SSA process. Does that make sense, board? Perfect. And I think we have more board members that can share.
Yeah, so I guess along the similar lines to Directors Emerson and Zierschmidt, my question is, so at the end, with this recommendation, are we just going to see a contract, or are we actually going to see measures? It's kind of referring to what Jill had said, but I just want to clarify that we're going to kind of see the whole program in the context with, I should say, the whole program as context, but also covering the contracts. Is that what we could expect to see in the springtime?
Yes, Director Fox, that's what you would expect to see.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and sorry.
Go ahead. I was going to take us in a new direction, so jump in, please.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just wanted to answer that question to Director Fields. I see Commander McDonald, Officer Miller. If there was anything that you wanted to add to that, feel free to. In regards to that process of the programs, measures, and all those other pieces, feel free to share.
Yeah, I'll hop in, Zinnia. Everybody knows I've taken copious notes. That was part of through the whole process, and so I see tons of opportunities for the police departments as well as the district. To the mayor's point, to Mayor Snyder's point of creating structure around the program, I think we've enjoyed a long relationship between the district and the police departments, where we've had a pretty clear understanding, but we haven't had that defined structure. And I think that out of a process, should we move forward, we'll come out with a defined structure, and we'll see some definite changes to the program, but with more intention as well. So I really see a lot of that. I have lots of notes that I won't bore you with tonight, but that will be part of that recommendation. I'm quite confident. Myself and Captain Struckmeyer from Tualatin have talked about it quite a bit actually already, about what that might look like as the programs, should the programs move forward. So anyway, we've got some great ideas, and we look forward to working on this as we move forward. Yes.
And then Captain Struckmeyer, apologies, I didn't see your name there. If you have something to add, feel free to do so as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like Jamie said it again. We've been talking, we've been texting while this is going on, just trying to make sure that we get the programs in alignment so we can, again, just move forward and make things better. Not that we weren't doing anything in our minds. I think we were already doing a fairly good job, but of course we could always do things better. So again, thanks for the opportunity, and we look forward to what's next, what's to come.
And then I just wanted to add to, in regards to measures, Director Fox, part of the things that came up as well in the conversation is we measure what we value, I think. And what was very clear was that our SROs and our police departments have highlighted that relationships and building connections is one of their main priorities, yet we don't measure that. And so that was a major gap in the in what we've learned. I don't know if Director Fields, you wanted to add to that, but I want to make sure that was brought up.
Yeah, I think it just comes back to really the work. I mean, developing a really clear work plan that includes having a shared and aligned purpose with strategies, outcomes, and how we measure and evaluate those accordingly. And I think Director Unn highlighted it exactly. So much we've heard about was, relationships and how this can be a preventative partnership, yet we can't sit here and list all the ways in which we strategically prevent and strategically measure the success of that prevention. And if that's what we believe is truly valued, we should have a really solid structure and intentionality around that. If it's about, creating safety and improving relationships, especially with our communities that have had more tenuous relationships with law enforcement, what are we doing strategically to ensure that happens? And that's intentional, so that a lot of things don't become by happenstance, or who happens to be in the building, or the administrators who happen to be, here long enough to know things. But even that piece, I think there was a big responsibility on the side of the district that got, that was really raised and highlighted here around training our own folks around what are those lines, what is that partnership, what does that look like? Dealing with some of that, I think was mentioned tonight, really being clear about it's not a partnership to ensure when we have fear of some of our youth, there's safety there, that is not a primary or an intent or a goal of the partnership. So again, like really solidifying what that looks like and what our strategies are, and then training everybody accordingly, because I think our administrators have been left out of that as well. And it's been left to the goodness and the hard work, which we have so many great people around this partnership. But again, excited for the ability to do it really well, strategically, and measure things accordingly. So the next time we show data, we can actually show the increase of relationship that's existed as a result.
Thank you. And I just want to check with Chair Wolf. I know that we're up against 8 o'clock. I don't know if I'm missing a step here, if we have to extend a little bit, or is that okay if we keep going?
I believe, and I'll let my fellow board members address that, but it's when you get past the 9 or 9:30. So I think we're fine. And I think out of respect for everyone's time, Director Unn, I noticed that Council President Goodhouse would like to speak, but that we can kind of come to a close on next steps. Because what I'm hearing overall from the board, and I believe Director Bowman hasn't shared his comments, so I want to give him that opportunity, but that we are progressing in a positive way. And so what I hope is that we can kind of move towards closure and try to stay close to that 8 o'clock closure. But thank you, Director Ann. I think we're okay.
Agreed. I think we are able to close in about 10 minutes. So Council President Goodhouse, I know that you said I know you've had your hand up for a little bit, and then we'll go to Vice Chair Bowman. And I'm not sure if Director Zerschmid went either. So go ahead, Council President Goodhouse.
Thank you. I'll make it quick. One thing from the committee, I noticed that it says students there. One thing I felt that was missing through the process was past students. So I don't know if there's a way to interject past students into there. We have a lot of the current students, especially with COVID. Some of the existing students may not have been in school or experienced that. But I think if there's a way to tap into past students, and maybe even past faculty members or superintendents or principals, that might be a great process as well. You get some of that history in there that know what they have done or what they haven't done. Might be great to add to that committee as well. Just kind of to bring that all together and look at it. I know that's something I was wondering why there wasn't a lot of the past students in there, but also it might be hard to get hold of them or in touch with them. But I think that'd be a great aspect to be in there, and really just to focus it on what's happened in Tigard Tualatin. I know some of the conversation kind of talked nationwide or other states or so forth. If the conversation can be, what's worked and hasn't worked in Tigard Tualatin, and what we want as a community would be great for part of the format as well.
Thank you. Vice Chair Bowman?
Thank you, Zinnia. So just three pieces of input that I wanted to provide. One, I wanted to elevate what Councilor Brooks mentioned earlier about a needs assessment. If we're going to be creating sort of things that we want to measure, job description, responsibilities, I do think a first step for that is a needs assessment from particularly students and teachers, I think, as important stakeholders. So I think that's really important. I also would love it if we can, before it comes to the school board for a vote, if the respective city councils can have the opportunity to weigh in and provide their feedback. I think that would be helpful. And then just wanted to emphasize my hope for consistency in a contract. And I appreciated Dr. Sue using contract singular, although I understand that there might technically be two. If we can keep those consistent, that would be excellent. And then I lastly just wanted to say thank you to Zinnia and John and Tara and all the team. I think when you think about when I think about the major things that have happened since I've been on the board over the last year and a half, when we've had these big community input opportunities and processes, the outcomes are just so much stronger. I think of the SIA, I think of this process, and I really resonate with what Chief Steele said about how in the process it was challenging, but it's led to a positive place. There were folks who said we shouldn't do this process because we should just leave things how they were. And there were people who said we shouldn't do this process because we should just get rid of SROs. But I do feel very strongly that the majority of folks are going to feel like the system has improved because of us going down this path. So I'm just grateful for the time that everyone has dedicated to this.
Director Zerschmid, did you get to go?
Because I was on the committee all the way through, I feel like I've talked a lot over the last 2 months about this. But one of the things that I want to make sure that steering committee has as they're going forward is the idea that the contract that we're going to get to is going to be a static element, but the process of reviewing what the SRO program is and how it's working and how it's not and how can we make it better. That should be something that is ongoing in perpetuity from here on out, because I think that was one of the components that came up in the course of all of these conversations that was a really powerful part. Is it working for us? Okay, we change it a little bit. Now is it working? It's working better. Is it working enough? No, we need to change it more and keep that review and renewal process going. And I think that'll be very powerful.
May I just make one more comment, Director? I just thought of this, and talking about the history of our district and the history of our cities. You know, whenever we have budget cuts, I was noticing in the Tigard report that, you know, we used to have peer court and then it got budget cuts. If something we can consider through this process is what are the priorities? So if we had to at some point cut something, what do we have to have intact? So that we don't just cut something randomly. Let's say, you know, it's 3 years from now, some of us aren't here. We don't just cut randomly, but we've been intentional about the way it's set up, and what is it that is the highest priority. So it's just something to think about, because, you know, we always assume the status quo, but maybe we should plan when and if there will be downturns. Just a thought.
Director Ann, I wanted to share my appreciation for John and Tara's work, that they really dug in to get the specific reasons for student concerns, so that we are able to make the needed adjustments to the program without having to eliminate it completely. And I'm also struck that I feel like everything we're talking about fits with the AROI work that we do and the program inventory. This feels like just another program that needs to be reviewed. And I feel like all of the elements that we've been talking about that the committee would put into the contract would be elements of the AROI template that we have, because it would say what the goals are and who's it supposed to serve. And it just was interesting as I kept hearing things about what the committee will be doing. And I feel like that is what they're going to be doing. So I'm grateful.
All right, Chair Wolf, I think that is everyone. We have here, can everybody still see my screen? Yes. So I just, I'm hoping to just say one thing before I hand it over to you, Director Wolf, is that I am filled with gratitude with our partners, but also specifically our students and the committee, the SRO review committee. They took this work so seriously, and it was an emotional process, in that people came in literally at each end of the spectrum, not willing to move, I feel like. And when we asked folks to come in and offer their insight as part of the SRO committee review, they were very adamant around like their intentions and what they were thinking. And the fact that the community came together the way that they did, listened to students, listened to the data, listened to one another, process the information, was something that I hope we can be proud of as a Tigard and Tualatin and just a community, to know that we can do difficult things, complex things together with care. And I think that goes back to the ARDA community, and it goes back to when people feel like equity work is elusive and they don't know what it means and what it feels like. This is what it feels like to do equity work. And I just want to make sure that people understood that. And with deep gratitude for students, shout out to Emily, shout out to, Rowan, and just your help in engaging students' voice. It again highlights the power that our youth have in helping make decisions. So I just wanted to applaud you all and just say thank you from the bottom of my heart to offer an imprint that is so powerful and meaningful for the broader community. So thank you so much.
Okay, with that, I have 8:09, so I'm going to hold to Director N's 10 minutes. And again, thank you all. You're so grateful. Have a great rest of your evening, and I'm certain that we will be gathering again as we get closer to revised plans. So thank you all. Have a great night. And we are adjourned.